watching Property TV.
Hello, welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin, and this is the show where you can have your property-related questions answered by our team of expert property professionals. So, joining me today is Azid Gungah, CEO of QUIDDITY Group, and Byron Crellin, CEO of Clearway Debt Squared. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Stephen.
Good to have you both back. We'll get straight on with the questioning because we've got some quite interesting questions today. And Byron, you're going first. I want to take possession back of a shop as my tenant has stopped trading. The shop, however, still has the tenant's fixtures and some stock in the premises. Can I sell these to my new tenant and offset the money against what my tenant owes in rent arrears?
Yeah, it's nice to be asked that question because sometimes we turn up and the landlord's already done it. And then the old tenant turns up and says, hang on a minute, that's mine. And, so there's actually, a fairly rigid process with this.
What's that old expression? Possession is...
Doesn't
Doesn't that work anymore?
No, not at all.
Right, okay.
So, in order for... So I'm going to be fancy. Yeah. Some fancy words coming up. So the landlord would basically engage with a third party, people like us and other companies that are out there that will do these kind of services, and we basically would serve a torts notice on the assets that are in the property. That torts notice and inventory then is displayed on the property. We would then send the contents of the inventory and a copy of the torts notice to any known address of the former tenant, and they've got a period of time then, typically 7 to 12 working days, to come and claim their assets and fixtures back from the property. If they don't, the law then passes and the landlord becomes the bailey. And what the bailey is that the bailey then his title is that the landlord can dispose of those goods as our viewer wishes, i.e. sell them to his or her new incoming tenant.
Right. Are you under any sort of obligation in terms of value of those goods? I mean, I could just see the case where, you go over time, you sell them, you get rid of them, you've credited whoever with the proceeds, and then somebody rocks up and says, well, oh no, that was worth 10 times what you got for them. And
well, it's twofold, and there's also some trip points in there. So as an example would be, we would be, say for instance, when we're doing the inventory, if in the drawer we found a fancy watch, we wouldn't write down, because we don't know it's a Rolex, or we don't know it's a Cartier, we don't know what it is, we would just put watch, silver. We wouldn't put gold.
Painted silver.
We'll take a picture of it, etc. Turn it over, see if we can get serial number, zooming on it, etc. Because we have been challenged. I'm going back a couple of years now where we've been challenged where someone will go, yes, my Gucci watch was in the drawer. I'm like, I don't think it was. Found this. That's not the one.
And even if it was,
Gucci spelled wrong. So you really have to sort of be due diligent on this. And so in terms of the question of assets and true valuations, we're not auctioneers. So we are part of the process. So landlord will contact us and say, right, I've got a situation, tenant's disappeared, I think they've gone bust, or it's an individual and they've just disappeared. They're not at the last known address that I've got for them. What's my options? I've got a new tenant, but I want to either, let's say it's a glass counter, it's a sandwich shop, etc. So the fixtures are good to go. It's pointless me getting rid of them for them to then have to get duplicates. So can I use that and then sell it and offset against the arrears that I'm owed by the tenants that disappeared? The process, strip it back, is torts notice, we do an inventory. It's a bit laborious, but it basically means that there's no comeback on the landlord that says in terms of, and we would then, the torts notice, that once the landlord becomes the bailey, as in title is mine, the landlord can then either say, look, I will agree a price with you, we'll get an independent quote to say the stock is worth X, and you can write a check out. Or alternatively, I can gift it to you within the terms of the lease. It remains my fixture.
Don't most commercial leases have a clause in there that says if there's anything left in the premises post the termination or breach of the lease, it becomes the landlord's property.
Only if it's determined to be abandoned. But the problem with that, and a lot of the commercial leases have been tightened up because what you're referring to, what a tenant would do. So, we're in the studio, and we would take the cameras and leave the water and leave the lights, because the lights aren't worth much, but the cameras are worth a steal. So we would leave you with the rubbish, and we'll take the assets.
We've only borrowed them.
Sorry. On credit. But that's the other thing, because the landlord's saying these are the fixtures, but are these fixtures subject to a finance agreement? Is there a third party involved that nobody knows about? That's why the talks notice is really important.
Yes.
In terms of commercial leases, and again, every commercial lease can be different, because some people will write a commercial lease in a pub on a beer mat and go, that's it, in stone. Most people will have something off the shelf. Organisations that we're working with, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, they capture most of it. So, but I think just in terms of our viewers' question, go through the process. Don't just do it, because you could get burnt on this.
Yeah, could cost you a lot of money, couldn't it?
Could cost you a lot of money.
Yeah. Okay, Brian, thank you very much for that. So, Azid, I know there are many new regulations being proposed to protect and assist long leaseholders, especially with lease renewals, which we've dealt with in another programme. However, are there any new regulations relating to management matters, particularly where tenants believe they are being overcharged with excessive service charges?
My favourite one. Well, actually, the short answer is there's no new regulations on the horizon right now. That's not to say that it's not going to happen. And in my view, it needs to happen, because you have very good ones and very not so good ones, property management agents. So what should your viewer do? I think there are some courses of action he or she could take. The first thing that we would normally do is to ask. So, for example, there's a request for payment. We would write to the property management company and ask for proof. So we would want to see the receipts of all the itemized cost of that work, for example, that they're being billed for.
Are you legally entitled to that?
Absolutely, you are. So you could write to the property management company, and within 30 days is a requirement that they have to write back to you and either open the books or show you some form of proof that these invoices have actually taken place. And you can, by all means, we've done it before, we've rang the companies that they have claimed that to have used. And so your viewer can do that. Failing, if that doesn't work or there's any kind of challenges, you could go to tribunal as well. Now, tribunal, as we all know, is not exactly the easiest route. It's not the most cost-effective route. And if you're one leaseholder out of many in a block, it becomes a very diluted, quite lonely place to be. So really, that's why regulations need to be tightened up, because I think you have one person against sometimes Goliath property management companies.
Yes. I think one of the problems that we suffer from, particularly in London, is that in the last, I suppose it in effect, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd say it's probably the last 30 years we've had this explosion of very high-rise buildings with 2, 3, 4, 500 flats even in one block.
Yeah.
And it has caused problems with management. I mean, the easy thing to say is, oh, well, you can get more than 50% of your tenants together, you can demand the right to manage. Yeah, lovely. Except if most of those people are abroad, and you've got to try and convince them to send you money to put in place the legal process and all that, it's just not going to happen. No. And secondly, as I've had to advise people in the past as well, where you get a sort of fairly strong residents committee who say, well, we're going to manage this ourselves. Really? It's a very litigious world we live in.
Yes.
It's a very complex world we live in. And as far as block management is concerned, it's highly responsible.
Yeah,
with all sorts of.
There's a lot of regulations around, and to do it like DIY, and if it's just not an option. But
there was a block in the northwest that we were not dealing with. We were appointed to deal with an issue of abandoned car on the car park within the grounds. We were talking to the managing agent, and they were saying that one of their issues that they've got in terms of service charges, that I don't know what the ratio was, but it was circa 30% of the properties on this estate, on this block, were owned by a landlord.
Yeah.
who wasn't the tenant.